Tonight, they awaken. A secret race, hidden here among us. With a lust for power.
We should be ruling the humans.
That knows no bounds.
The world belongs to us, not the humans.
They have no fear. But one.
There are worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me. There's a war going on out there. Blade, myself, we kill as many of them as we can find.
Part human, part immortal.
I know all about you. Daywalker.
He alone has the power of both worlds.
All our strengths, none of our weaknesses.
And when the world of the living is at an end, he alone can turn back the tide.
You're nothing to me but another dead vampire.
Wesley Snipes, Stephen Dorff.
He makes the weapons. I use them.
Blade.
Hey, we're back with 90s Night, and it's another edition with myself, and of course, I'm your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro, and I'm joined, as always, by Kells McNells. Kells, how are you? Yeah, good to have you back. Back in the saddle for another vampire 90s night, believe it or not.
I am surviving and thriving. I'm very excited to continue talking about vampires just because it's fun. And honestly, watching that 90s trailer for Blade, they don't make trailers like they used to, mostly in the way that like they used to give away the entire movie and have the best music and the voiceover. But my goodness, it's so delightfully.
I love that light,
90s.
like that. It's kind of like this
That
sleazy,
ambient,
slow,
yeah.
like techno. It's not techno, but it's
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like it's like
ambient
that
techno.
doing
It's
things
like,
up because they want the voiceover to still have some presence in the trailer. I love it.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of it.
oh yeah.
We're of course talking about the 1998 film Blade, and of course starring Wesley Snipes and Kristofferson and a whole bunch of other people, which we'll get into the cast obviously a little bit later on. But of course, listen, if you're returning for another episode of 90s Night and you're checking out the Black Fawn Distro channel, thank you so much. Big news. We hit 900 subscribers today, which is awesome. We're 100 away from hitting our target of 1,000, obviously, so we can get fully monetized. Kells, yes, Kells has the what is it? Those are celebratory fireworks in the background there. We're pumped on this. So thank you so much, everyone. We really do appreciate the support and the help getting there. And of course, our goal is just to provide as many of these interview series, obviously on our Takeover Tuesday series, these 90s night discussion videos, and of course we've got some Hot Stove from Hells coming up. And Kells, you just launched your new show called Streams and Screams, which is available on our YouTube channel, on the Black Fawn Distro YouTube channel, exclusively on there. I think you've got half a dozen up now, more coming, more on the way. Congratulations. Thanks for doing that for us.
Oh, thank you. They're just fun little bite-size bite-size reviews of movies that are currently available through streaming services, because sometimes you just need to find something to watch, and I will be here to recommend things to you.
What's your intro for that series? It's like Streams and Screams. You go watch a thing and then tell people about it. That's
that's an unofficial but official description of it. It's a show where I watch a thing and I tell you about it. That's basically it.
Of course, my reviews are up there as well. I'm doing more theatrical stuff coming right out of the theater, or trying my best. I just put up Talk to Me. Obviously, that was one of my favorite movies of 2023. So I cheated a little bit because I was supposed to see that movie in the theater and I missed it. So I kind of had to review it because I liked the movie so much from last year. But I am going to try this year in 2024 to try and review stuff kind of like the night I see it and have it up on the platform, up on the channel the very next day. So listen, if you're returning to the channel, thank you so much again, like I said. And if you're new, please do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. Kells, I don't know if you can, it's below you. It's not on that screen. It's actually below there. And listen, if you like the video and you like this episode of 90s Night, give the video a thumbs up. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you've got a suggestion for another film to review for 90s Night, let us know as well, because we'll definitely take it under advisement. We'll consult our attorneys and we'll see what we can come up with. But this movie was you were hot on this movie. You kept pushing this for sure. This is your choice for sure, Kells, because you were like, what about Blade? What about Blade? And I was like, I don't know. I just saw it recently. You're like, yeah, okay, cool. But what about Blade? So what we decided to do is like a couple months ago, we did From Dusk Till Dawn, obviously another wicked vampire film from the 90s. And we decided, hey, listen, why don't we do, like, we just did a trilogy of monster or creature features, monster movies, which was Starship Troopers, Tremors, and what was the other? Arachnophobia. Thank you. So we said, hey, listen, why don't we do a kind of like a mini trilogy of 90s nights focusing on vampire flicks? So we did From Dusk Till Dawn, and then we were like, which ones do we do? And you were like, Blade. We got to do Blade, man. So we saved this one. We took January off, obviously lots of stuff going on, going into a new year, et cetera. But hey, listen, February is Black History Month, and we felt what better movie to review for Black History Month in February than 1998's Blade, a movie that I think is a little bit underappreciated, and I think you feel the same way as well, and certainly influential, and more influential than people realize on the movies that perhaps came after it, which we'll get to throughout the episode. So again, thanks again for checking out Black Fawn Distro. Of course, follow us on Instagram, hit the subscribe button on our channel, and tell your friends, share these videos if you can. I think we just put on 901, so we're 99 away from 1,000. Wayne Gretzky, everyone. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and we'll get there, and we'll continue to do things like this. All right, so Kells, you want to give us the rundown of the flick here? Sorry, before I get there, it's been a while. Spoiler warning. Okay, the movie came out 25 years ago, or over 25 years ago. If you haven't seen it, this is your time to duck out. But we're just assuming that people are there to hear what we think of the film. So that's your spoiler warning. And of course, Kells, throwing it back to you. You always come up with a drink. Obviously, we posted that on our Instagram today. And if anyone wants to make it at home, they can follow your recipe. But tell the people what you got over there.
So for today, I thought I would make something that's a little bit thematically appropriate, a little dark, a little sort of daywalker vibe to it as well, with some of the themes and of the flavors. So I have the blood serum, which has this lovely combination of blood orange soda, grapefruit juice, morning citrus deliciousness along with the blood orange, and then black vodka on top to kind of really give it that dramatic flair. I'm going to give it a little swirl because there's a lot of black vodka sitting on top of this that I'm probably going to drink all in one go, but let's see how it goes.
Now here we go. Taste test.
It's actually really good. This is really delicious.
Listen, I gotta say, that's one of the coolest drinks you've come up with.
Thank you.
You just sent me the photos this afternoon, and I was checking them out. I was like, how did you get everything to sit on the top there? That looks awesome. That's a Halloween drink for sure. And it's good?
It's really good. It's again, I like that the combination of the blood orange and the grapefruit, because it has that daywalker morning wonderfulness.
Right.
And I've never had black vodka before, so I had to track it down because I really wanted to try it. And it's definitely going to make its way into my rotation for these sort of themed drinks because, I like to have a nice visual, and this is definitely a really cool visual for this drink. So I'm here for it.
Awesome. Ties into the leather, the black leather of the movie, and the black Dodge Charger, sorry, and everything else that goes along with Blade. And of course, my name today is Payday Walker. It's a little shout out to the one of my favorite candy bars from the U.S. And of course, Kells, you are Anti-Theft Katana. And here we go. Let's jump into let's jump into Blade. Of course, there's lots of synopsises we could read on this for this film on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes or any of those sites, but we figured, hey, it's the best when you read it off the back of a movie, just like the olden times when we used to go into video stores and rent movies on a Friday or Saturday night. So here we go. Blade. Wesley Snipes stars as the tortured soul Blade, half man, half immortal. Blade sharpens his lethal skills under the guidance of Whistler, Kris Kristofferson, his mentor, guardian, and fellow hunter of the night. When the bloodthirsty immortals Lord Deacon Frost, Stephen Dorff, declares war on the human race. Blade is humanity's last hope for survival. All right, Blade. And of course, this is going right back here on the shelf. So everyone can see it as I just knock some stuff over. But yeah, Kells, you got some numbers for us and some details about the release. What do you got?
I got some numerical values. So this film was released by New Line Cinema. It was theatrically released on August 21st, 1998. Production started in LA in like February 1997. So it took a little bit to kind of get this one out, but as I think that's not super uncommon with big budget movies like this one. The film was directed by Stephen Norrington, who did The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen as well. That was kind of the one other notable film that I recognized on his roster. It was written by David S. Goyer, which I did not realize, but he is also known for Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and one of our favorite films that we've recently shared, Dark City, which is baller. This movie stars Wesley Snipes, Stephen Dorff, Kris, Kristofferson, Nebuchadnezzar Wright, and Donal Logue. And yeah, I know, again, speaking of numbers, it had a pretty substantial budget, but also decent money coming in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the budget was $45 million. So domestic box office, this was a hit. This was a box office hit. And one of the reasons that this movie is so important to both the comic book movie genre, as well as Marvel, as well as probably Wesley Snipes and everybody else that kind of followed along in his footsteps, is it was the first movie that was somewhat bankable as a superhero movie in this new era, right? So there was obviously for Marvel. Sorry, I mean DC had done a decent job. Obviously, they had the Superman franchise. They had Tim Burton's Batman, but in the late '90s, those had kind of fallen off as well. So this was Marvel's kind of first foray into comic book movies, and it made the studio realize that there was money to be made here. So, domestic box office, it took home $70 million, and the international box office was $61 million, and of course, comes to a total of worldwide box office gross of $131 million. Of course, all figures approximate and in USD. And that was based on a budget of $45 million. So you figure, again, if you're putting out a film, $45 million is the budget, double that for the print and advertising costs to market the film and put it in theaters. So it's about $90 million, made $131 million internationally. So yes, it was a box office success for New Line as well as Marvel. And of course, did a lot of business on sort of VHS, DVD once it hit retailers and went to home video. So currently, it's 58% on Rotten Tomatoes with 109 reviews, which is criminally underrated. But the critical consensus is, though some may find the plot a bit lacking, Blade's action is fierce, plentiful, and appropriately stylish for a comic book adaptation. So again, I had to rant a little bit about this because I feel like 58%, even after all this time, like not a critic or two out there isn't like, I'm going to do a retro review of Blade and trying to get that up to 60% so it's fresh. Give me a break. Especially, and this is going to tie into something I'm going to say later, but especially with Disney taking the reins, man, I've seen some absolute terrible movies that come out and they get 75, 76% because everyone's just like, oh, Marvel, like MCU, regardless of whether or not they're good or not, they get a great rating for some reason. And Blade sitting at 58%. Come on. Anyway, that's my rant over. But listen, there's we always talk about the runtime of these films and how films in the 90s were kind of shot differently or made differently. This movie, 2 hours and 0 minutes, 2 hours right on the money. That includes credits. And so you've got a nice runtime, establishes the movie. We're going to get into there about the plot a little bit later. Of course, coming up to talk about how efficient this movie is. That's a word that keeps coming up when we talk about these 90s films. Efficiency in runtime, which is so important and something we wish would come back to movies in theaters this century as well. Okay, let's talk about the marketing. Kells, you did some research into this. What did you find out?
Yeah, so there were some great little taglines associated with this flick. The first being the power of an immortal, the soul of a human, the heart of a hero.
Oh, so awesome.
It's just like, against an army of immortals, one warrior must draw first blood, which is another super metal one. I like that. Vampire hunter, sometimes it takes one to kill one, which is another really great line. I love that. The very cheeky, have you given blood lately? And the last part man, part vampire, all hero.
I feel
So
like that last
really,
one's sort of like a kind of a callback to RoboCop, right?
yeah, it's really
Mhm.
leaning on the heroic elements of this, I think, which is appropriate for Blade because he's a damn hero.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
lots of I mean, so talking about how we watched the film. So I checked this movie. I had this movie on Blu-ray forever. I think a lot of people did, or DVD. I think originally with the original kind of black poster that they had, or the black cover art. But I recently, like I said at the top, picked it up on 4K. It looks absolutely awesome. I'm pretty sure it was shot on film, and it's got this gritty sort of style to it. It really pops on the screen. Of course, there's tons of blood in this movie, and all those reds pop on the screen as well. So if you're a 4K aficionado or a 4K nerd like I am, make sure you pick this movie up. It's well worth it. You can probably get it for like $30. We're not sponsored. This particular show is not sponsored. We don't get these sent to us for free. We actually go out and buy them, or we watch them, or we rent them with our own dollars. So New Line, if you're listening, is New Line still yeah, New Line still exists, right? But any other studios out there, if you want us to debate a 90s movie out there, you know where to send it and who to get in touch with. So also, I wanted to show this off because I'm a big music fan. The Blade soundtrack, if we can get it in there. Classic Blade soundtrack. I'm
Beauty.
going to show the back here. And I'll talk about this in a little bit because it's one of my favorite things about the film. And it's such a 90s thing, but really, really awesome. Of course, we got a little mention of the classic New Order remix
Yeah. The
below,
parental
and
advisory is very, like, 90s as well. I love that. The parental
that's because
advisory
you know
sticker.
why? Because it's all hip hop, Kells. It's
Mhm.
all hip hop stuff on here, and of course, hip hop was dangerous in the '90s. So
Yes.
was parental advisory, which was great because this little thing right here, that
Mhm.
let me see, parental
It's
advisory,
sold.
that just told everyone which albums to pick up because they were cool.
Those are the good
So
ones.
there you go.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, how about yourself? Like, how did you check out this movie? And do you have any like childhood memories or earlier memories? I know this is always a challenge for you, but did you like when did you first see the film, and how did it come across your desk? Because it's obviously really, really close to your heart because I had to hear
Yeah.
about it for so long.
I just think it's a damn great movie. I really love action films. That's like a secret side passion of mine. I grew up watching a whole bunch of them. So to back up a minute, I watched this on Crave because I don't leave my house and I stream a lot of things. And so this is one of those things. Oh, I never found a new reaction. That's cool. Apparently my computer just does this. I don't know how I'm doing this, but it just pops them
See,
in
mine
there.
doesn't. That's an indicator. If you're watching this video, give this video a thumbs up. There you go.
Absolutely. I can't do 2 or it's gonna do explosions again, but, yeah, so I love an action film. I love, some great fight choreo. This has some very silly fight choreography in it, which I really appreciate, but also some great, overall action sequences. I, as per usual, do not remember how this came across my desk. I feel like, there was probably a period of time when I was late teens or so, maybe early 20s when sort of Marvel films were really first starting to take off. I'd seen it before then, but I just didn't really have a super strong memory of it. So I watched it again during that time when Marvel movies were all the hullabaloo. And yeah, just kind of really appreciated, again, the action of it, the drama of it, the mystique of it, the really crazy cool details in the costume design as well as the props, because I love a katana that just cuts your hand off if you're not the proper one to be holding it. Absolutely live for that. So yeah, I think this is just one that just spoke to me for all those various reasons, and it's just a damn good film. I can't help it. It's so much fun.
Cool. So, as we usually talk about, I am a
Yeah,
few years older than you.
a little bit,
Just a few, not
just a
nothing
bit.
crazy, but just a few. So I saw this movie in the theater, and
Mhm.
went because this was around the same time where we just like me and my buddies would be like, "What's playing? Let's go see whatever." Like, and obviously, Wesley Snipes had done a bunch of stuff before this, so we obviously you love Demolition Man and Passenger 57 and all those awesome action films. So when this came out, we were like, "Whoa, cool! Like vampire flick with Wesley Snipes. Let's go see it." And Stephen Dorff was sort of like a name too that he was just kind of establishing his career, and he was sort of like a little bit of a hot commodity, like a little bit of a hot commodity back then. And it was awesome. Like we just went on a Saturday night and checked it out, and it's exactly as advertised. I mean, you
Mhm.
watch that trailer off the top; it's super 90s, and you got to think Imagine you didn't know anything about what was past 1999 and you saw that in your TV or in the theater. You're like, oh. So that's what we did. And we all said that, and then we went to see it. So, but 1998, I was a lot younger than I was now. And of course, I think it's a good time to put in that it's been a movie that I think is sort of, you mentioned a lot of little things in the film. And I want to get into those as well as the cast, because there are a lot of really kind of interesting things that sort of fall into place in this movie. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I'm paying more attention to the film when I'm watching it to take notes and stuff for these shows, or if movies just don't do this anymore. And specifically, there's lots of little details that make sense with the plot. It makes sense with the characters. The characters act in a certain way. So it's kind of a believable arc for all these characters. So let's get into that. Let's talk about the cast. Of course, let's start. We got to start with the man, Wesley Snipes. This role is always his, right? I mean, I know they're coming out with a new film, but it's Wesley Snipes, right?
He's the OG, and I think this film was kind of written with him in mind, if I'm not incorrect about that as well, that there was a couple of names that they had that they were kind of keen on, but he kind of kept coming up as one that they were really drawn to, for good reason. He has the attitude, he has the sort of suave energy, as well as just being like way too cool for school in this movie, and just in general, I feel. So yeah, there's just something about him that, like he said, is just so totally Blade. He has that sly sense of humor at the same time, that little like teeth baring grin that he has as well.
Yes,
And there's
which I noticed you were aping a bit on the gram today. So
yeah,
the teeth gnash
the teeth
after,
gnashing.
yeah. So we're gonna throw a few stills up on the screen here too. It was hard to find lobby cards for this film. It looks like they only came out in France and maybe Asia when the film was released. So I had to go grab more stills this time than lobby cards. But obviously that's a great classic shot, one of the promotional shots that they released to the press when the film came out. But yeah, I mean, you got the 1968 Dodge Charger,
Yeah.
which is the same car or similar car that was in Bullet.
Yeah.
It was in Fast and the Furious. It was in Death Proof, and which is kind of a cool bit of a note. And like, I mean, look at Wesley Snipes here. I mean, like, he's got all the gear. He's got black leather jacket, black pants, big black boots. Like the shades are I think are iconic to the character as well.
Totally.
And of course, well, and that's, I mean, I think he foils well with Stephen Dorff, right?
Totally. And I think one of the things that I love about this character and about this movie as well is you kind of hit the nail on the head there with the car and the outfit and the tools. He's kind of like a black vampiric version of James Bond in this way. Like, he even has his queue that he goes to like get all the cool tools and get all the fun little gadgets that he uses to make vampire hunting fun. And you really didn't see that kind of take on the sort of not so much secret agent, but like this underground fighter that's going against a certain group of people that are trying their darndest to ruin the world or take over the world or do something with the world, as villains often do. So to present it as this like really cool, badass half vampire guy is really, really fun. I love that.
And here's a classic shot of course, Stephen Dorff and Wesley Snipes
Yes.
going face to face, the big showdown sort of in the third act.
Mm.
And of course, Nibouche Wright is the love interest or kind of the sidekick. I don't know what you would call her character in this film, but she's very reliable. And again, one of those things that we kind of keep an eye on is sort of like, how do these characters sort of, how do they feed into the plot? Like, what do they bring into the table? She brings quite a lot in this film, and I dig her too. Like, I'm surprised that I haven't seen her in more stuff after this film, but
Mhm.
we'll get to Stephen Norrington as well, because he kind of fell off the face of the earth after in about 20 years ago. But yeah, I mean, she's a fantastic actress, and I think she plays really, really well off of Wesley Snipes' Blade. And of course, she's it makes sense. Like one of the things that I liked about this film, that's a great shot of her. I don't know why Wesley Snipes has his armpit up like that in that still, but
He's getting a
that's
sword.
apparently this was one. He's reaching for his sword, right? He's reaching for
Yeah.
his sword. But yeah, I mean so what I liked about this film quite a bit was the opening is so awesome. It sets the tone, sets the table, but not just the flashback sequences with which kind of explains Blade's mother and how he was born, but also the intro of the film itself, right? So when you go back to present day and obviously the iconic bloodbath scene, which we'll throw up a couple shots of, and we'll talk about that in some detail at the end here, but there's lots of little things at the start of the film that I really thought were quite clever, and they come back later on. So there's a shot where you're not quite sure who the woman is, who's obviously she's injured, she's giving birth, and it's obviously Blade's mom, but you don't get that until the license drops on the floor. There's a shot of the license, and I remember watching it, and I was just like, I never picked this up before, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. When Karen, who is Nebuchadnezzar, right? So she's a doctor. That makes sense in the film as well. She's in a hospital, so great.
Pathologist too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I thought, like, how many movies have we seen where like that's really convenient, right? It's like, oh, we need a blood specialist, and there's some guy on the bus that's a blood specialist, right? So, but with her, she only gets wrapped up in this because her ex comes to her at the start of the film and says, "Hey, we've got this charred up body. It's really weird. The blood is super odd. Like, there's something weird going on, obviously, because the guy's a vampire. Can you come down and check it out?" And she's like, okay. So she's put in these situations because she's a professional, right? Like she's not just hanging out, getting a coffee in the hallway. And
Yeah,
now
and
she's
just like
roped into
happens
this.
to get in the way. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Then she's attacked, right? And when Blade looks at her, he's gonna leave her because he knows that she's bitten and there's no hope. There's no hope for her. He later on says he should have killed her, but he doesn't, and he doesn't because he remembers. He thinks about his mother and how his mother was bitten and was attacked, and nobody really helped her, and that sort of thing. And when I watched it, I was like, oh, that's so okay. I get it because I've seen that flashback. I just saw it, but how would he know? And it's later on. It's just a quick scene where Karen finds the license from his mom in his sort of like his hideout, and that's how he knows what his mom looks like, right? Because it would have been somewhat of a recent picture of her at that time when the movie starts, which is 1967.
Totally.
Really nice little touches that I feel in movies I don't see anymore. I don't know. Your thoughts?
I absolutely agree. I think there's lots of little, not even Easter eggs, but just like little seeds that are planted and kind of sprout throughout the movie. One of the things, again, being a pathologist, is having this knowledge of blood and this experience as a doctor to try and she's bitten and she's going to try and cure herself, and she has the skills and the ability to at least attempt to do so. I also do kind of love that scene that introduces her with the vampire that she's coming to check out to see what's going on with his blood. It kind of has almost like this Melrose Place vibe to it, where there's like this conversation between these two coworkers that clearly used to have a thing going on, and then they don't have a thing going on anymore. And it's almost very banal, and like you kind of are like, okay, what is this doing? And as soon as you have the thought of like, why is this scene going on so long, the vampire pops up and attacks, and it's just perfect, kind of sets you at ease, and so you're comfortable, and then it just throws you right back in again. And I really love the timing of that scene. I think it's very clever, and it's also kind of a great way to just launch everything forward all over again after the craziness that is that blood rave scene. Because of course, after you do that, how do you bring the energy down and then bring it right back up again? You have a chase scene in a hospital in which they're shooting at Blade, and he kind of gives them a what the hell look, which is also very funny to me.
And also too, like there's little things too where so Curtis, who's the ex-boyfriend of
Mhm.
Dr. Karen, he comes back too. Like he has a little bit of a he doesn't just go away. And it's funny because like the reason I like this movie so much again, and why I think we like all these 90s movies, is that the scripts are tight. People
Mhm.
actually spent more than 5 minutes on them and really kind of worked out little things. There's a line of dialogue that says when Blade is he's explaining to Karen like how there's humans that are marked for vampires and stuff, and how they're whatever, they belong to somebody, like if you're bitten or whatever. And so that's kind of where like Curtis is sort of found in like he's attacked by uh what's the guy's name,
Donald Logue?
Donald Logue, but the character Quinn, right? So
Quinn,
Quinn's
yeah.
his character's name. So Quinn actually attacks him because he's all burnt to a crisp and everything. And and then, you know, he kind of has that guy as sort of a, I don't know, like
Familiar?
a familiar at the end. So
Mhm.
all these things sort of like they line up, like it makes sense that things come back and into the script and out of the script, and they don't just show up when they're convenient.
It's very economical that way. Like, everything that is used comes in for a purpose, and it's not even necessarily just the one purpose. It comes back to it again, so it really kinda solidifies the reason it was there in the first place.
A couple things of note too. I thought so your name, the anti-theft katana, like the
Mhm.
katana with the exploding thing, that has its day in the sun. It's very,
Oh.
it's very cleverly put in place where you're like, oh, okay, so it does that, and then it does pop up a couple times, and it's used as sort of a to Blade's advantage a couple times through the movie, which is awesome. And I also thought like there's a scene where when they're escaping the hospital at the start, where she dislocates her arm, and he just like aggressively pops it back in. But she returns that favor, which I think is a nice
Mhm.
callback. And it makes sense because why? Because she's a doctor, right? She
Yeah.
would know these things.
She's not
And
just like
also, yeah, and it creates sort of like how they're like a team. And so obviously when they meet, and we got to talk about this guy, Kristofferson, who is amazing in this film as
Yes.
Whistler. He's sort of like the, Blade's Alfred,
Q.
right? Like,
He's his
yeah,
Q, his Alfred, yeah.
yeah, and the three of them together sort of like working through things. Like there's some really great sequences and just dialogue moments where they're talking about how they can help each other out, and how can they maybe look for a cure, and how screwed she is if she's bitten, and how when she's going to die, and just like there it's gruff, and it's like no nonsense, but it's also like very pragmatic, and also there's a little bit of heart there as well, where the characters do care about what happens to each of them, and understand that they're all kind of in a kind of a shitstorm of evil vampires that are trying to take over the world.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love that Whistler his character was created for Blade's cameo in, 1994's Spider-Man: The Animated Series, and he was the Marvel CEO liked him so much that he was kind of adopted into the MCU, just because there was like, he's a good character. Let's actually expand on this and bring him back. Which brings us Kris Kristofferson in this fantastic role that feels like it was made for him, which is just the right amount of gruff and just like a little tiny touch of tender. There's the scene near the climax of the film where something happens to Whistler, and Blade kind of goes and is trying to help with him. And evidently there was that scene where Blade kind of finds him all mangled up, and Wesley Snipes couldn't stop laughing at that scene because you see this mangled bloody Whistler, and he's like trying to clean him off with this tiny piece of gauze that is doing literally nothing to address the mass amount of blood covering. He was just like wiping it with a small piece of gauze, which I found hysterical. And apparently he did too. So but, yeah,
That
I think he's such a great character, and he really drives everything forward, and also gives the reason for having all these cool devices, these cool, toys that he can use to fight these vampires with.
Yeah, and I thought the exposition of when he's talking to Karen about his backstory,
Mhm.
not just like, sorry, Blade's backstory, which is great, which is a natural thing that you would do. Like, who's this guy? Hey, you're his friend. Can you tell me about him? Like,
Yeah,
why is he like this? As opposed to being like, what's your deal? Because you're not really
yeah.
going to get the full story. So she asks that. She has a this great conversation with Whistler, and he kind of fills in those gaps. But he also fills in the gaps of how they got together, like Whistler and Blade, and he kind
Mhm.
of recounts this story of how he lost his wife and his two daughters to these evil vampires that like made him pick, and like in which order they died, and it's like this kind of tragic, really tragic story. But it's not overdone. Like it's not like I feel like he just says that story and then lights up a smoke, and he puts his brace back on his leg, and
Yeah,
it's just such an old classic sort of like cowboy archetype where
yeah.
he's like, yeah, all this shit happened to me, and like, I've got cancer and I smoke and all this stuff. And he's like, I just want to mow these motherfuckers down. And like, I
Yeah.
feel like that's such a cool character to have. Cause I think it balances out Blade, who is sort of like, um, he's
Undersharing.
yeah, undersharing. Yeah, undersharing. Very cool. Cool as a cucumber. And then of course the audience is kind of along for the ride with the doc, not knowing who these characters are and stuff. So it felt like really felt genuine and like in just solid, right? And I think David S. Goyer is David S. Goyer has had he's an interesting cat because he's written some kind of horrible movies, and he's also written some of the movies that are my favorite of all time. Dark City, Batman Begins, et cetera, et cetera. His filmography is definitely is super interesting to take a look at.
Yeah.
But no doubt he got hired on the Batman films because of this film. I think that's probably pretty clear and pretty obvious. And I will say this too. My other thing I will talk about the plot real quick is that I love the twist at the end in the third act is really, really well placed, and it's not overdone. It creates sort of like a I don't actually know what's going to happen right now with the reveal that Blade's mom has been alive this whole time. Really, really cool. I just thought I just think it works. It makes sense, and it's not. They don't tell. They really don't telegraph this. You don't see him crying over the loss of his mom. She obviously means something to him. The loss of her, or the presumed loss of her, has made an impact on his life and how he does things. But he doesn't beat you over the head being like, guess what? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Something's going to happen.
Mhm.
I thought it was really, really good. Really, 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 really well done.
Yeah, they don't marinate in it either. They kind of have that moment. They allow you to feel what you need to feel, what Blade needs to feel. But he also understands that, like, he's got to keep doing his thing. He's got to keep doing the job that he came there to do. And discovering that his mom is alive is can't really stop that or slow that down. And especially after he's going through all that he's going through physically and trying to recover from that. So I do appreciate that while they have this big reveal, they don't like no, 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 no. Like, it doesn't shut everything down. You know what I mean? It just sort of keeps going despite that. It doesn't completely derail the entire plot. It doesn't completely derail the scene either. It allows it to move forward naturally.
Yeah, and I think like Blade's physical attributes, his physical abilities, like his super strength and sort of stuff and stuff like that,
Mhm.
really well done in the film too. There's some CGI that was in the 90s, but for the most part, they show him like there's just a quick thing where like Whistler says like hold her while he's injecting her with the serum or whatever, and he just puts his one hand on her and he can hold her still because he's that strong. So I thought that was great. And listen, let's also let's talk about the iconic opening scene too, because I know we wanted to talk about that, and then we're obviously talking about the bloodbath scene, right? Also, shout out Tracy Lords, who has kind of a cameo or a small role, I guess, at the start of this film. And of course, yeah, this is one of the, and we can roll this right into talking about the special effects and the blood work and the other practical effects that are used in the film. I my one gripe when this film is like, I really wish they had used all practical effects because
Mm.
the middle chunk of this movie and even this like is so awesome. It feels so gritty and so grounded that I wish they had kind of used more blood work. But again, it was the 90s and it was kind of when they were like, well, we can do this stuff, so why don't we do it? And then we don't
Yeah.
have to whatever. But anyway, let's do you want to talk about the opening scene? How do you
Yes.
want to do this? Let's throw up some skills. So
Let's throw some stills. Absolutely. I love the opening scene because it just when do you ever really see this type of blood rave in a film really? Like, it's just so unexpected, but at the same time, like, of course it's gonna happen. It's a vampire movie from the '90s. Of course it's gonna happen, but you kinda don't see it coming the first time you watch it, and then so that moment that the blood just starts literally raining down from the ceiling, it just yeah, that's how you feel internally. You just
great
feel like
shot of it too. Yeah.
just yeah, absolutely, and I love the subsequent fight that follows after this as well. It's a great introduction to the character of Blade, showing off what he is capable of, showing off some of the tools he kind of gets to work with, some of the tools he gets to play with, and also kind of sets up this really great sort of battle, kind of ongoing fight that he has with Quinn, which apparently Quinn originally had a much smaller role in the film, but Donald Logue was so funny on set that his character was kind of expanded and he was allowed to ad lib a good portion of his dialogue because he's just a naturally funny guy. So I thought that was a fun little as well. But yeah, it's a great fight scene where you're seeing everyone just coated in blood going at it, and I'm getting distracted by these images because it's so fun. I just can't
Yeah.
stop. I can't get
Listen, you
over
can
it.
tell, and you can tell, and this is what's so crazy is you can tell that all this blood, all this fake blood is real. It's all on the
Real,
screen. It's
yeah.
all there. They actually
That's
made it come
not
out of the
CGI.
come out of the sprinklers is a great shot. All this, like, I mean, it must have been so much fun to be there and shoot this sequence. And of course, it reminds me a lot of, the infamous Event Horizon story of the Event Horizon sequence. Of course, light spoiler, but like there's a movie I just reviewed that has something like that in there as well. It must be so much fun. It looks so horrific, but like when you're on set and you're kind of filming this stuff, it is a lot of fun. And they all a ton of extras. And of course, Blade pops in. It's such a great introduction to the character, like you said, Kells, and like just popping this back up here as well. I love his armor underneath and the buckles and stuff, but
Yeah.
I love how stiff that black leather jacket is. Like, I love how it's almost like double stitched. It's like starched almost.
It's
Like, it looks so cool.
enforced. Yeah, reinforced, triple reinforced.
A-
Absolutely.
And then he just shows up and kicks ass, right? And of course,
Mhm.
like, I love the DJ too. It just has like the word bloodbath written on a white sheet hanging behind him. Shout out to this dude, man, because like this is all I want from movies, like for myself. Like I just want to be
Yeah.
like, hey, can I be the scuzzy DJ that like starts the bloodbath? And like that'll be my claim to fame forever. Speaking of Donald Logue, here's a great shot of him in makeup. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure this is him. It could be somebody else underneath all the prosthetics and in the makeup there, but this is just an example of just the great makeup jobs, blood work, special effects, whatever you want to call it, the practical effects that are on screen. This looks so cool. Of course, it's just, yeah, it's an awesome display of that. I wish that they had leaned into this a little bit more. My guess is probably it was budgetary reasons. But when I'm looking at this, like I know the kills are like the skeleton. I just feel it's the skeletons. I feel it's the skeletons. I wish that they would just like blow up or just incinerate completely. Kind of
Mm,
like the hands do in a couple of spots.
right.
I think that's what it is. I think the skeletons just remind me a little too much of like Army of Darkness and like the old like Sinbad movies, like in a
Yeah.
kind of a cheesy way. And I don't think this movie plays it as cheese. I think it does try and play it straight for the most part across the runtime, right? So
Yeah. And I think speaking of Army of Darkness, I think between this this bloodbath and the scene at the end of 2013's Evil Dead, where it's literally raining blood as well. Like that's given me
yes, that's the other
unrealistic
one. Yes.
expectations about what it must be like to just be like rolling around and like running around and fighting people while just blood is raining down. Because it looks like a lot of fun. I would want to try it under the right circumstances, probably.
Yeah. And apparently, so these things are a bit of a thing here and there. I guess they've actually had a couple of real ones, not real blood,
Well,
obviously,
like real, like it is in the
but
movie,
like in
real. Yeah.
Amsterdam, I read a thing online that said in
Oh,
Amsterdam
of course
they
they
run
would.
one of the, of course, right? Like techno, techno capital of the world or whatever it is. And they've done them a couple other places. I don't know what they would use. I don't know
Oh.
how you would get it through the sprinklers. I don't know how you set that up, but
Ask the creative team of Blade because they managed to pull it off just as well.
hey, if Stephen Norrington was around, I
Mhm.
would give him a call, right? So he hasn't made a movie in 20 years. I wonder why. I don't know.
Wow.
It seems like he's had a lot of projects he's been trying to get off the ground, and nothing's really happened. So, which is unfortunate because I feel
Yeah.
like, of course, he turned down the sequel to direct the sequel, and of
Mhm.
course, that sequel is directed by Del Toro, and I think is one of the best sequels maybe ever made. To be honest, if I can
I
say that out loud.
I think you can. I also feel like Stephen Norrington, maybe he retired from filmmaking just to go run these bloodbath parties in Amsterdam and
That's what he's been
worldwide.
doing for 20 years. He's like, you
He's
know
gonna
what,
do it.
guys? I got $1 billion idea.
People are
We're
gonna
gonna go to
love this.
Amsterdam. We're gonna get some anyway. Yeah.
It would go
Um,
crazy. They'd love it. Yeah.
so yeah, so again, I just wish they'd done the vampire kills practically, but I
Yeah.
do feel like it's a budgetary reason thing. And it was 1997 when they were filming this. I'm sure they were like, you know what we can do? We can do all this
Yeah.
stuff with computers.
We could go
I
crazy. Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
love that shot when Steven Dorff is cut in half at the end, and his body separates, and then it
And
goes
then goes
back
right
down
back
with the
together.
glooby like CGI blood, which I really liked.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it does go a bit batshit crazy at the end in the third
Oh
act,
my
and I don't
God.
know if it needed to do that, but I like the fight scenes. I like the sets are amazing too. All the
Yeah.
stuff that went into I love it in movies when they're like they got to put a guy in this thing and then they cuts him somehow and the blood goes through this thing and
And it's like,
dumps into this dish and like it's like Mousetrap, right? Like remember the board game
yeah,
Mousetrap?
yeah.
It's like this thing goes in here and then it circles around this thing and fills this logo in and like I love that shit and I think it's so cool what they did with making it sort of like almost like an archaeology find and they're sort of trying to restore that thing. You can hide a bunch of stuff in there and hide a bunch of stuff that's like not finished, right? So,
Yeah.
but
Through their
yeah, I mean,
vampiric Rube Goldberg machine. I love it.
yeah. So, okay. So, just wrapping up.
Mhm.
We said we're going to keep this under an hour, so we'll see. We're in the home stretch now.
Working on it.
Let's talk about your favorite quotes because there's a few in here and there's some funny stories behind some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me find them. Um, I love the line, "Still heavy," and Whistler goes, "But you're so big," in reference to the big bulky, flashlight thing that he has to carry that he fries the one guy with. It's also a really great scene with some practical effects. They probably threw a little bit of CGI in there unnecessarily, but neither here nor there. I love the line that's, of course, of the trailer, "There are worse things out tonight than vampires," and Dr. Karen says, "Like what?" And Blade goes, "Like me," and it's very metal. And then, of
So
course, the
cool.
iconic line, so cool. The iconic line, "Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill," which apparently, when discussing the character of Deacon Frost, Wesley Snipes described him as the kind of guy who'd ice skate uphill. And Stephen Norrington and David S. Goyer like loved the phrase so much, like, we got to put that in the movie. That's great. That's absolute gold. So they just chucked that in there, and I think that's fantastic. I
Which
love
is
that.
cool because it's Deacon Frost, right? So
Yeah.
it's a bit punny in
Ice
there, which
skate.
I
Yeah.
dig too. And yeah, something of note too is that Wesley Snipes was a producer in the film too. So
Ooh.
maybe that's how he got that in there. Um, any other favorite quotes at all? You want me to go?
You go. I
All
got
right.
my 3.
Okay. So I love the line from Blade himself. He says, "You give Frost a message from me. You tell him it's open season on all suckheads." I like that. I love the and I forgot to throw this image up, so we'll do it now. But just a quick still of Kris Kristofferson as Whistler. Abraham Whistler, I think that's his name, right? So that's
Mhm.
his full name. When he
Like,
says
Van
crosses,
Helsing.
yeah, yeah. So he says crosses don't do squat. I really like, and one of my favorite lines is when he crashes through the wall in the car, right? And he
Mhm.
says, and it's just like this massive explosion. They hear the rumbling and all this stuff, and he pops out, and then the camera kind of pans over, and you show him he's standing in this blown out doorway, and like all the smoke and rubble and stuff. And he says, "Catch you fuckers at a bad time." I love it. It's so funny. I think it's the best
Yeah.
line in the movie, and like it's great. I love that dude. And and the other the other line that he goes when he gives him like the little piece of the vampire Bible, and he picks it up and he says, "What is this? Smells like a vampire wiped its ass with it." So really funny stuff from Kris Kristofferson, folk music
Mhm.
legend, might I say, and singer-songwriter Kris Kristofferson. And of course, my favorite interaction between the characters is probably Blade and Karen when she says it's all in the sequence in her apartment where he's smashing everything, and she's like, "Is all this really necessary?" And she says, "You're robbing him. You're gonna rob me too." And Blade responds. He said, "How do you think we fund this organization? We're not exactly the March of Dimes," which I think is a pretty witty retort for that, and a classic '90s, I think, retort, if I may.
Absolutely. I do enjoy the fact that, like, David Fincher was attached to direct the film at one point as well, because I feel like that would have been a very, very interesting movie to watch, but he actually worked with David S. Goyer on a draft of the script as well, which I thought was an interesting little tidbit of information, just thinking of what this movie could have been. Uh, but
Man, that's something to think about, eh? If
yeah,
if
yeah,
this was Fincher's claim to fame, like,
for
was the
sure.
Blade movie and how it would have looked.
I imagine the fight scenes would have been very different. There's speaking of, like, the Deacon Frost fight scene at the end, it's great, I love it, but it also makes me laugh so hard because there's the one bit where they're literally just, like, they both have their sword things, and they're just doing, like,
Yeah, yeah,
Where,
yeah.
like,
Ting, ting, ting. Yeah,
just
yeah.
constant like, goes on for so long, and they're not accomplishing anything, and I find it absolutely hysterical.
I tried
Yeah.
to find a still of that and I couldn't. So, but yeah, I agree. I mean, the fight sequence is a little like the ending is a little anticlimactic, a little bit, but like I said, uh, going back, I think it's just it goes a bit too nuts on the CGI at the end.
Mhm.
I think when they take out the vampire elder, who is what's that actor's name? He's always in a bunch of stuff. Like whenever you need a creepy European looking old guy,
Oh,
he's the guy.
Udo Kier?
Udo.
Ud
No, sorry,
Udo
what's his name?
Kier. Udo
Yeah,
Kier.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's in, End of Days, like, I feel like he was in every '90s
Oh,
movie,
yeah, absolutely.
love that dude, but when they take him out and they kind of, like, they force him to watch the sunrise, I feel like that sequence it feels like that's half and half. It feels like it's CGI and practical, but I could
Mhm.
be wrong. I do think it's awesome how they got that, Steven Dorff has the sunblock and he puts it on and they flip the visors down on their motorcycle helmets and they take off on their motorcycles after killing this vampire elder and he kind of takes control of the vampire council, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, you had a funny take on the vampire council, right? For the
Yeah.
with the chairs.
Oh my gosh. So I was when I was watching it the other day, like they're having this very super serious conversation. It's all very melodramatic, but like because of the outfits they're wearing and because of the cheap leather chairs they're sitting on, you just hear like every like sentence, you just hear their chairs squeaking behind them, and it's so so silly. I
How
couldn't help
loud
but
were you
laugh.
listening to this movie on Crave?
I mean, reasonable volume.
Okay,
My
so
dog
when
was
I
not
w
entirely perturbed.
so I did notice that as well, but not to
Yeah.
the extent that you did, but then I read your comment, and then when I watched it, I was just like, "Okay, that's for" actually, I'm noticing it too, so but I
Yes,
guess
yeah.
you would have to have it in there, like, I think would it seem more fake or less real if
It
if the
well,
leather squeaking but it's like leather on leather, right? It's like when the
yeah,
Klingons sit down in Star Trek, right? Like, they're always like
exactly.
they're
Just like,
like, it's like so much leather.
just squeaking their way through their dialogue. I don't know, I love it, I thought it was so funny. I couldn't help but giggle at that, and it's so hard to take them seriously through that whole conversation, but maybe they left it in because 'cause they're like, "It just adds intrigue, it keeps you focused." I don't know.
Yeah, it's,
Or they just genuinely didn't notice, that's also entirely possible, and they're like, we can't cut this out, they'll be offended by the costume design." I don't know, but I love it all the same.
well, listen, I gotta say, so some final thoughts for myself on the film,
Mhm.
is that I feel like every time I watch this movie, I sort of I kind of believe that Matrix stole a lot from this movie too.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously it came out a year ahead of the Matrix. We just watched Dark City together.
Mhm.
I think I need to do a show on that. We need to do a show on that. Maybe we'll do Dark City versus the Matrix. I don't know. We'll see.
Mm.
Sound off in the comments below if you wanted us to do a 90s night on Dark City. I love that movie.
So
And that's
great.
when I saw the Matrix, I was like, well, this is kind of feels like the same plot or similar. Like I still love the Matrix, don't get me wrong. It's an amazing movie. But I do also feel stylistically, I feel like it borrowed a lot from this film. Leather jackets, motorcycles, like I don't know.
That's
There's
just
no
the
cell
'90s,
phones.
baby.
Yeah, I mean, there's yeah, it's like, kids are gonna watch this and they're gonna like, man, does everyone just walk around in like leather
Full
trench
leather
coats? And they're like,
dusters, yeah.
and listen, I had a knee length black leather jacket too at some point in
Nice.
the '90s. So just full disclosure, right? but but I do feel like it's just like I don't know. Every time I watch it, I feel like take something from there. And I watch The Matrix, like even when that, like I just mentioned that car sequence where Whistler kind of crashes through that sequence when the kind of like they're vampires, but they're kind of in SWAT gear, right? And they're kind of like they're sort of kind of creeping through these hallways. It feels a lot like the lobby scene in Matrix.
Mhm.
It's not as, of course, effectively done because the Matrix had more cash, but also there's that sequence that when Blade and Frost meet in the they meet in the park, and there's he shoots his gun at him, and it almost seems like bullet time there. It almost seems like bullet time where they were like, it's
Yeah.
computer, it's CGI, but you can tell maybe that the Matrix was like, if we could just do that, but like swing the camera
More.
around, like maybe we'd have something. So anyway, just my 2 cents. I think this movie sets up it sets up one of the best sequels ever made in Blade 2, which I think is awesome. And Blade 2, I hope that's on 4K soon, because I think that movie would look awesome. And of course, one of Del Toro's first films that he directed. So definitely worth checking out. Don't watch Blade Trinity. I haven't watched that movie in forever. Maybe it's time for a rewatch, but I just remember hating it when I first watched it. Blade 1 and Blade 2 are the ones to go with for sure. And it's hard to believe, and I think this is kind of why we decided, or I agreed, but you really
I
pushed
decided.
this. You decided, yes, you decided, and I went along with it. But is why Wesley Snipes, why this movie is so underappreciated. And I don't know if it's totally underappreciated now, but I just feel like this is the first movie that kind of got Marvel off to the races. If it wasn't for this movie, Sam Raimi's Spider-Mans probably aren't made. The X-Men movies probably aren't made. Maybe we don't even get the MCU if this movie bombs or never gets greenlit. I'm not sure. I know when I know when Black Panther came out, they said finally a black superhero. A lot of people said that online and stuff. And everyone's response was like, whoa, 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 hold on a second. What about Wesley Snipes? What about Blade? And I think that's kind of true. Like, and I feel like I know a lot of artists out there do sort of like renditions of like characters together, and I haven't seen a lot of stuff with like Black Panther and Blade.
Hmm.
So I feel like hey, there's something to consider out there for sure. And I'm a little nervous because of this about Marvel's new reboot, or Blade's representation in the new MCU, or in the MCU, I guess. I'm nervous. Like Mahershala Ali is going to be starring in it, but it's got all kinds of problems on production, and I don't know. I mean, I think Blade's it's got to be gritty, grounded. It's got to be R-rated in similar style as like the Netflix Daredevil shows and Netflix
Mhm.
Punisher shows.
Yeah,
I want that as
I
Blade,
want
and
that.
I don't think we're gonna get that. And there's some talk that it was gonna be a movie, then it was gonna be a show, then it's gonna be a movie again. They don't know what to do with it. Disney is not in my good graces right now, I'll be honest, because they just keep screwing these things up. Just make a Blade movie, make it R, make it for people that are over 18, not adults. You don't even have to make it, just make it for like slightly older kids, slightly older teenagers, 18 and up, and make it
Make
kick
it
ass.
practical.
There's no reason to, and sorry, Kells, and I'll throw it back to you. So I'm sorry, but I get passionate about this stuff sometimes. But I hate the fact that they have this whole multiverse bullshit going on right now in the MCU, and it gives you opportunities to do all kinds of stuff. And why not put Wesley Snipes' Blade on screen with the new Blade? Mahershala Ali and Wesley Snipes together fighting off vampires back to back in sort of like I don't know, like a Lethal Weapon style type of thing, like super awesome. But
Mhm.
I have no faith that that's going to happen, but we'll see. Ryan Reynolds is still doing Deadpool, and who knows what kind of tricks he has up his sleeve. But
Mm.
I'm going to stop talking, because I'm sorry. Throwing it back to you. Your final thoughts.
Uh, well, thinking of Blade Trinity, now that you mentioned it, I feel like Blade Trinity is like the Batman and Robin, like the 1990, what year was Batman and Robin? But the one with Alicia Silverstone and Chris O'Donnell, it's like that
Yeah,
version
with
of
Clooney. Yeah,
Blade. It's yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah.
That's like Blade's answer to that movie, I think. Um, yeah, I think that, like I said before, it's a fantastic action film. It's, speaking of Black History Month, like you mentioned, this was kind of like everyone talks about Black Panther, but there was Blade first, and before that, even a little bit, there was Todd McFarlane's Spawn, which did not make nearly as much as the box office. I
Sorry.
think it only
Yes,
made like
that's a great
80.
comment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it made 87,000 at the box office, and off a budget of, I think, like 40 million or something like that. So not a huge return on it. And it was a year before, it's 1997. So this kind of came hot on the heels of that film. So I think that this was kind of an excellent time to start to explore those kind of darker superheroes a little bit more, that they can have those more adult mature themes and have them a little bit more violent and have them a little bit more gritty, and also leading into the very 90s film The Matrix at the same time. So it's a very 90s film to me in terms of style, in terms of energy, in terms of effects, especially all the CGI, but there's just something so um earnest and earthy about it at the same time. It's a very grounded film. It's a very economical film. 2 hours on the dot, and it means every minute of that screen time. I agree with you about Disney. in every way, shape, and form. So I'm not going to speak on that too much, but
And
I think that,
we want Disney to be better.
and
But
that's the reason why
man,
we have feelings, because we want it to be better.
right, but
But
the stories are like they're just I don't know.
yeah,
I feel like this movie, what would this movie do if it came out today? In this style,
yeah,
like would people gravitate towards it or not? I'm not sure. I think they would.
I think they would, especially if it was all practical effects. Let me tell you.
Yeah, or the things that they can do with CGI now. My
Mm,
and we've talked about this before in the program is like, but if they can do more with CGI now, would we have gotten a lot of the grounded in reality like vibes of this film? Like the bloodbath scene would probably not be done practically. Maybe it would be, who knows? But I feel like they're like, oh, we can just do that CGI. We can just do that in
mhm,
CGI. So maybe it doesn't have that feel to it that it's supposed to. But again, I could feel like movies nowadays, like they got to get back to making like flicks for, this movie was 45 million. I don't know what that is in today's dollars. Let's say it's 90 million bucks, less than 100 million. Like make movies like that. So you have to, it forces you to kind of make it on the street. You gotta film it in alleyways and like abandoned
mhm,
warehouses. And you don't have these crazy sets or crazy sound stages that you can kind of, do anything you want on. You got it with green screen and whatnot. You gotta focus in on what you can actually do. Your hands are tied.
yeah,
How do you get it done? And I feel like in the 90s, uh, th- that's what a lot of filmmakers did. They
totally,
had a budget and they really stretched it, and
for sure.
sometimes it really worked. And I think this is one of those examples.
I absolutely agree. It's all around. It's like we've been talking about for the past hour. I think it's just a fantastic film that is underappreciated. I feel like it does deserve a little bit more love. And yeah, I have to watch Blade 2 now because I forgot that was Guillermo del Toro's film. And I definitely have to spend more time with it now because after rewatching Blade the first and sort of rekindling that appreciation for it, I think that would be an excellent follow up for me to do next with more of my blood serum, of course.
Yeah, and that movie, what's really cool about that flick too is that it kind of picks up right where Blade 1 like leaves off. Even the epilogue of Blade
Mm,
1 sort of rolls into Blade 2 without it rolling into too quickly. Like it's cool that the way they did it. And they gotta start doing that again, just being like, here's your movie. It's the beginning, a middle, and an end.
yeah.
Don't worry about what comes out afterwards. And just see what this film does. Focus on this film, not the next film that comes out afterwards. And I think
Yeah.
that's what makes at least Blade 1 and 2 really successful. Anyway,
Agreed.
as Kells mentioned, you just said we've been talking about this for an hour. That's a note. It's a
That's
nudge
our
for me
cue.
to stop talking. So, hey, listen, this was great. This is awesome to do. And
You're
again, shout out
welcome.
Wesley Snipes. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give Kendrick Lamar a quick shout out too on Wesley's Theory, which I believe is based on is about Wesley Snipes on To Pimp a Butterfly, his legendary record. So look into that if you're curious about anything about Wesley Snipes. Is an interesting story of how he put that together, an interesting commentary, and
Mm,
that's all I'll say about that. But
amazing.
yes, this has been another edition of 90s Night. Of course, I'm your host, Benner, Payday Walker. A little shout out to one of my favorite candy bars. And also, who doesn't like Payday every
Mm,
2 weeks? And Kells McNells, of course, my sister in arms. You are the anti-theft katana tonight. And of course, if it's your first time checking out 90s Night, we really do appreciate you checking out the show. Please hit that subscribe button down below. Tell your friends, leave a comment, give this video a thumbs up. See, mine doesn't do it. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you back on the program. Oh, there you go. We'll see you back on the next episode of this show. And of course, if you're checking out the Black Fawn Distro YouTube channel, make sure you check out our other shows as well, including Takeover Tuesday, our interview series, our Hot Stove from Hells, which are basically our debate panels on film series that we take comparisons that we do. And of course, I have my Benner's movie reviews up there and theatrical new releases if you want to check those out. And of course, Kells, you've got your new program just launched very successfully, might I add, Streams and Screams, where you check out a thing online and tell people that if they should see it or not. Anything to add before we go?
no. Thank you, everyone.
All right, cheers, everyone. Hey, listen, we're gonna play another trailer from Blade. This is actually the 4K trailer from when they dropped the 4K a couple years ago. So check it out. And of course, until next time, I'm Benner. This is Kells McNells, and we'll see you on the next episode of 90s Night.
Bye.
Vampires. They're everywhere.
You're one of them, aren't you?
No. I'm something else.
That's him! Blade is the key. All our strengths. None of our weaknesses.
There are worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me. He makes the weapons. I use them. It's open season on all suckers.
Let's do this.